Alrighty, this is meeting number 2 of Nobodis Tribe. We did a meditation, which I got lost in. I had no idea that time was going by, which is cool. Is there any topic that I talked about last time, or any topic that you've been thinking about this week, or a situation, or anything that you would want to bring up to talk about?
Last time it was just like the inner, what do you say, the inner self?
The inner self?
I was just thinking about that, that's all.
What about the inner self? Because some people call it the higher self. There's different definitions of it. I would say a good majority of teachers call it the higher self. I call it the inner self, partially because I don't want to use the same terms that other teachers use, and also partially because I feel like higher, lower, or inner, outer are all definitions that only exist in a reality like ours, like a physical reality, so they don't accurately depict anything truly.
Yeah, I was thinking about inner and outer and what they mean. Like, outer, out, and inner is in, right?
Yeah, so I do this.
You said something about bringing the inner self to the outer self?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, okay. So, bringing the inner self outer, I don't know about most, a good majority of people feel as if life is something that is put on them. Life is an outer experience that is put on them as an individual, a fragment that is cut off from life, and life is out there and it's being forced upon them, whether it's problems or situations or whatever it may be. Have you ever identified with that?
Like, why is this happening to me?
Yeah, like, why is this happening to me? Or,
yes,
I would never choose this. What, you know what I mean?
yes.
Because
Like,
ultimately, when you get to the idea of awakening and consciousness, you understand that your life is an intention on your part. You chose to have this experience. But we hit the cognitive dissonance when we see that experience seems thrust upon us and we don't want it. So why, like, we're asking, why would we want this to happen? So often because we have the idea that we're a cut off fragment and experience is being forced upon us, we don't have the ability to actually push our inner reality outward, because our inner reality becomes a mirror of our outer experience. Does that make sense?
kind of. So, like, if I think positive, or if I'm saying positive, stay positive, that means it's going to project out?
Yes. But
I believe in that.
do you really, though?
Yeah, well, because that helped me from, like, where I was a year ago. Something was just telling me, just think positive, because I was so into thinking negative. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? But I see now, I put myself in that situation. Those situations. Because I wanted to be there. But I didn't, but I did. Because, obviously, I was there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Life is a little confusing sometimes. So, have you ever heard the terms like unconscious behavior or acting unconsciously?
So, I don't know, like, can you explain?
Yeah, so when a certain situation happens, a program happens within you, and you have robotic-like behavior, meaning generally it's discord, like shouting or yelling or frustration or violence, and that comes from a place that is unconscious, and it's like a program. And it also comes from what I call the conceptual self, which is a self-created personality that has been used to navigate this experience. It's mostly for survival, either not just physical survival, but psychological survival is something that has defenses and fears and is very concerned about its annihilation. So that programming sees a situation, you unconsciously react to it, and then after it's said and done, you believe you chose it almost. You take responsibility for it. Somebody will say, why did you do that? Well, I did that because so-and-so did this. There's immediate connection. You're connecting with, and again, once again, that conceptual self is responding one more time and saying the reason I did it is because of this, a justified reason as to why I acted unconsciously. But you weren't conscious of the behavior while it was happening.
It was just a reaction.
Yeah, and if you were conscious while it happened, you wouldn't need to have that reaction or that behavior that came about. So the repeated cycle of this unconscious self coming through causes one to mimic the outer experience is energy. For example, if somebody comes up to you and comes with a very negative tone, why did you do that? You respond back with, because of, wow, you match their energy.
Yeah.
So that would be a way of living. It's unconscious. It's a behavior that comes out of constantly matching the frequency of the experience you're having.
Mm-hmm.
So the way to get, because I would say a way to get to your inner world out, but the thing is you're always getting your inner world out. If you look around you and you look at your life circumstances and you think and you see your thoughts that you're having on a daily basis, that's your inner world. Your inner world is always reflected by your outer experience. But we, in this experience, are often creating an outer world that has very discordant energies, very confusing energies. So if there's confusion within here, we're constantly experiencing a confusion out there. So if you can't identify the confusion within you and change it, it has to manifest as an outer experience to make it so real. Because if it doesn't make it real, then you're not going to believe it, because you're not seeing the confusion within you. So it's like, okay, if you're not acknowledging that the inner world is very real, it's going to turn that inner world to outer world. Does that make sense on some level?
Yeah, kind of.
Where's the confusion exactly?
I'm just trying to keep up with your inner world and outer world. Like, can you repeat it?
Yeah, no, of course. I don't want to go above you, but sometimes it's hard for me to know what you're thinking exactly. Okay, let's say you have a strong belief that you are not liked by people.
Okay.
You have a strong belief that you're not liked, and you're completely unaware of it consciously. You've hidden it from yourself, and all you experience that feeling as is a constant feeling of needing or wanting. And you're not aware that you're constantly seeking approval, and you're not aware that you're constantly afraid of people leaving you. But you know that something's wrong. You know you don't feel good all the time. But you're not able to realize that you have a belief system that says that people shouldn't like me, or people don't like me, or I don't deserve to be liked. If you cannot access that belief system on a conscious level and change it, then your consciousness is going to make an outer experience where somebody does leave you. Somebody makes it clear they don't like you.
Yeah.
And so one of two things can
I
happen.
think like that a lot. Like at my previous job, I used to be like, nobody here likes me and stuff, and like my boss doesn't like me. He was trying to reprimand me. And yeah, it was just totally weird. And yeah, I felt like not liked. And now I'm at a different place, my job, at a different site, and everyone likes me there.
And an interesting thing is,
And sometimes I want to think that they don't like me. You know? I want to be accepted. But I don't know. I gotta accept myself.
yeah.
It's hard.
And have you ever had the thought that you wish you knew what your higher self was saying, or your higher self was guiding you to, or your inner self?
I try to listen, but it's hard to listen, because like you were talking about the last time, we had this little, our brain talks and stuff like that, you know what I mean?
So it's not a secret.
That I can't push, you said not to ignore it, right? That little,
What?
the little voice and whatever, The person inside me.
Yeah, so the voice in your head.
Yeah.
The conceptual self.
Yeah.
That is that conceptual self is like a parrot, and it's a parrot parroting the vibration of the experience that we're in, which is a very strange one. No, I was kidding.
Yeah, you say not to ignore it, like to accept it, but it's hard. I don't know how to accept it, you know. I mean, sometimes I want to ignore it. It talks a lot of crap.
But it's not that you're accepting it as in you're like saying that you want it, but what happens is it's that voice also accompanied by emotion, because emotion does not happen without a belief system. You cannot experience an emotion without believing something first. So when that voice is happening, it is clearly showing you what your belief system is, and it's probably accompanied by an emotion that feels like lack or negativity or something like that. So it's basically, you could see it as something that's bad. Oh, this is trying to take me down. Like, this is the evil. But you don't have to see it that way. You can say, okay, this is a messenger from my own consciousness. It is part of me, and it is letting me know clearly where I have belief systems that are out of alignment with how I want to be or who I truly am. And you know that they're out of alignment with who you truly are because they feel negative. That's the primary speaker of your subconscious or of your soul is through the medium of emotion. If you ever feel any emotion, specifically the most paramount ones, the ones that are like earth-shattering, where you like have anxiety and you're uncomfortable, those are the ones where you really have to say, what do I have to believe is true in order to have this emotion? Somebody leaves you, you get fired from your job, and you have this terrible feeling. You say, I would have to believe that my reality is out of control. I have to believe that lack is part of who I am. I have to believe that I won't be okay. Those are all belief systems. And for some, they might, well, I just want to be realistic about the situation. But your belief system is literally setting the foundation for your future trajectory. You're constantly creating with your belief systems, but many are so out of touch with their belief systems that their belief systems get pushed outward as an outer experience, so then they blame the other person or they blame the situation. Like the story I was telling you about where you'll have the experience of somebody saying they don't like you or leaving. One of two things can happen. You could realize that was an inner reality that was put outward, that you would drew forth that experience to show you something, and in doing that, the universe is giving you an opportunity to uncreate that energy, because when you see it happen, you're going to say, I'm going to use this to become more conscious, not less. I'm going to use it to become more loving and not less. It's basically like same situation, different response. And your life is going to give you practice on that, because it's going to keep bringing up those same things over and over again. And it's specifically the ones that give you the most intense reaction. It's going to bring them up over and over again, as if life is like doing a nuclear holocaust on your consciousness. It's doing it on purpose, and it's not doing it, you're doing it. But the experience of physical reality is so separated on one level, or the experience of being separated from your true self, that it can become very confusing, because there is your personality that you're created to be, the one you know yourself as in your daily life.
I'm trying to learn myself as. I'm trying to learn myself.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet. I've been through a lot, like chemical dependency and all this and that. And it's like I lost myself. I didn't even know where I was. So I'm still trying to figure it out.
But not knowing who you are is a lot closer to understanding your consciousness than knowing who you are.
I'm trying to.
I'll tell you this. Some people.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, that's good. Some people that know themselves, they're well adjusted to life, the ones you would look up to and envy, Like, I wish I could have all my stuff together like they do. Like, look at them. They got this, they got that, they got everything. I wish I had all that. On this, their manifestation, a good majority of the time, not always, is very cosmetic. It's on the surface. It's material, or it's all an illusion, because deep down they're hurting and they want out of that life.
Yeah.
But they may not be experiencing any type of thing that rips away anything out of their life, and so they're only one event away from going into utter chaos in their own inner reality.
Yeah.
And so I've noticed at times that I would envy another human because of what I saw that they had, while simultaneously they were envying me because I didn't have to deal with all the stuff that they were dealing with, or whatever. I noticed that they were extremely unhappy when I got to know them more, and so I was envying something that was illusory.
It was illusion.
What?
You said illusion?
Illusory.
Okay.
Yeah, an illusion. So I guess you could say the primary factor that's going to help you manifest your dreams, whatever they are, and this isn't like a get rich quick teaching. This is just understanding the basics of consciousness, that we have a factory inside here that is constantly labeling things and saying we know them. I know this, I know what that is, I know where my life's going, or I know what I can't get to, and I know what I can. And so we're constantly sending out these labels, and by doing that, we're basically blinding ourselves to anything outside of that mental box.
I think the sky's the limit.
Why stop there?
The universe.
I'm
It goes on and on, but
just kidding.
it's just there. But I do hold myself back a lot, and it's my conscious.
Well, of course it is, because on the level of consciousness, I guess I'll start maybe at the beginning of what I was going to do.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I prefer to talk about things that I know that you're interested in. Okay, an intro into consciousness, and this started with the. Let me get a drink of water.
Is it called intro consciousness?
Intro to consciousness.
To consciousness.
Yeah. So, an intro to consciousness. Again, this was founded under the notion of severe depression, a strong desire to not exist anymore, very, very fed up with my experience, not well adjusted to life. I felt like I was a victim of my own emotions, and I also felt that I was too sensitive to life to do anything. Like any direction I went, I would collapse and come back to not doing anything because everything was so painful, or I had so much depression in me, or whatnot. And so this led to multiple epiphanies where I, radically changed that state of mind. And one of the main was I understanding that what we are as consciousness is, you could say, a center point of awareness that is part of everything that exists. So obviously everything is one, everything's connected. And as consciousness, we have no bounds, we are unlimited. And we go into form as an experience, to experience limitation, which is not our natural state. That all limitation that we do experience is literally a manifestation of how unlimited we are. So we're so unlimited that we've decided to use all of that abundance of probability and become limited because it's so strange to us. How does that resonate?
Confusing a little?
Yeah, so confusing a little. And you don't have to, like, everything I say you don't have to believe it right away. I'm not asking you to believe. It's anything that comes from my inner world and is useful to you, then take it. And if anything doesn't, then discard it. So I'll use a story of time, but this isn't. Everything I say is they're just pointers to an inner world that I want you to experience, and I want you to know for yourself. There's no dogma involved. Like I know some teachings where it's like, if you don't do this, then you're going to be doomed for eternity if you go down that road, or even like New Age teachings do some of that stuff. Like if you're not on this path now, then you're going to be in perpetuity in this very bad experience, or whatever it may be. So not just like hell or whatever, but for me it's just getting the inner data outward as a teaching. So consciousness is completely unlimited, boundless, formless, but goes into form and experience to experience what you could call creativity, but doing it in a very limited way, because doing something so limited and then waking up to the fact that you are the impetus of unlimitedness is a very profound experience. Does that make sense? For example, like a person may climb to the top of a mountain, but when they're at the bottom of the mountain, it's a very difficult climb. And then as they're getting higher and higher to the top, it's extremely difficult. But once they get to the top, they're like, now I know why I climbed the mountain. It's the same with consciousness. Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. So that's an intro into consciousness.
So it's like he says, like climbing a mountain and getting to the top and realizing he did all that hard work to reach your goal.
You understand why you had limited yourself, such as going in place where there's like less oxygen, hurting your muscles, putting on all this equipment. Whereas somebody would be like, why would you put all that weight on you? Why don't you just walk freely and do it somewhere else? So for example, in another experience of consciousness, such as, let's say, in a dream world that you've had. If you notice, in a dream world, you may be in one room, and then a moment later you're outside, but you didn't walk.
Yeah.
So
it'll be one scene and
then another scene.
Like
so
a whole different thing.
And those experiences of consciousness, which are as real as this is now, there's a lack of continuity, there's a lack of limitation, because your consciousness is literally manifesting its environment instantaneously, and there's no need for there to be a continuity. There's no need for time. There's just, I'm thinking about this room and talking to this person, and all of a sudden I'm thinking about petting my dog, and you're over in a different place petting your dog. There's no continuity. This experience is exactly the same, but we've created a continuity as a physical environment. So like, it's hard to grasp fully on one level, because our experience shows us that we're in one physical environment all the time, and we never leave this physical environment. But like, an example that's like a real example that our world knows is that your cells are like constantly dying and regenerating. And they say after 7 years, probably shorter for most of your cells, but for your bones and stuff like that, I think it's 7 years, you don't have a single cell or molecule in your body that's the same. Everything is different. So you're basically constantly dying and being reborn every moment, with cells living and dying, yet you still know your body as the same body that you were born with, if obviously growing and changing, but you're alive amongst a bunch of deaths that are constantly in flux. So the same thing as understanding consciousness is that though you feel yourself moving in a continual reality that is out there, and it's always out there and separate from you, doing its own thing, not realizing that at every moment you're actually moving to very different realities, and the parameters are set up based on your belief systems. So like, think of it as at every given moment you're constantly manifesting everything that is happening on a soul level. Like, if this wasn't the experience that you wanted, you wouldn't be here. You would be in dreamland or something.
Picking a nap.
Yeah. So at one level, you could use that as mind candy, as an interesting thought, and just apply it to your life, because it won't become obvious at first. It becomes a lot more obvious when you when you change your experience so much based on changing your belief systems that it looks so much different than it did before. So like if your experience looks the same constantly, it will seem as if you're occupying this one space. I had an analogy that I wrote down called the room. Have you ever like been in a room with people and it's just it feels uncomfortable, the energy in the room is off, the people either have bad intentions or they're just shady people, and you feel uncomfortable? Or even if you're just at your house and you've just been watching TV for too long and you just feel like this heaviness in the room, you're just like, I need to go do something to feel better. You could step out of the room and all of a sudden there's this new energy and everything seems a little different. You're like, okay, I feel good again, I'm glad I got out of there. For some people, they live in that room. Their whole entire life, their work, their house, everything is in that one room that's uncomfortable. And there is no getting out of that room because they continue to occupy it and create that one room.
They don't want to leave.
Exactly.
They don't know anything else.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And they don't see that they're in a room.
Yeah.
So the idea would be to make the room so different that you do understand that you're constantly moving to a new experience based on your belief systems.
I'm trying to decorate my room or move to another room. Get out of myself.
So, and I put in my notes, going from the being trapped in the conceptual life or feeling like you want to manifest your inner world outer. First, it starts with opening a space, and that space that opens is realizing that you are a consciousness that is separated. I know you're getting uncomfortable. I know, me too. I'm like, my legs are going to sleep. So that your consciousness is literally the present moment itself. It is a formless, shapeless energy field, like in our meditation. You are like a literal presence that is constantly now, and past and future have no validity to it. It is only experiencing the now. But the mind and most of our suffering and doubt and fear is linked to past and a perceiving possible negative future, or perceiving a possible positive future that's better. And so opening that space allows you to make the focus of your life your state of being right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say in the now. I gotta stay in the now.
Yeah.
Because even if I think about the past, I get depressed. And if I think about the future, it's just anxiety. Can't think of that. Stay in the now. Because if I'm in the now, I'll be happy. For now. Just for now.
Yeah. And even if some get confused that the now is the situation that's happening now. If there's a conflict happening now, the now is literally the space in which the situation happens. So it's like what some would argue and say, well, the now is pretty shitty because look at what's happening. The now isn't what's happening. The now is literally the space in which it is happening. It's your presence, your formless presence. And so when you can access that, you realize that you have a choice in what you participate in and what you allow to interact with your presence.
I can be positive about it or negative about it, right?
Yeah. But the thing is when somebody becomes conscious that their state of being is literally laying the foundation for what they will experience, if they feel negative, if negativity happens to them, they have negative thoughts, then they will say, oh no, I'm messing up, I'm thinking negative, and therefore I'm going to bring about a negative reality. And then they add another fear, another limitation on top of it. When I was talking about like accepting that voice or whatever, it's because if you have an issue that comes up, it is showing you something that is an unconscious belief, and it is to be used. Okay, like I am feeling this right now, I'm going to fully allow it. I'm not going to argue with it. Because if you try and argue with it, you're pushing it back to come back again later in a more profound way until it can
Yeah.
fully get your attention. So even see the emotion and the thoughts as an outer experience. Does that make sense?
Like, if you write it down, that could be an outer experience, right? Like,
Well,
whatever that little thing is.
technically there is only inner experience. It's all inner experience. But inner and outer are ways to define it. So I would say you could see what is happening, all of it, including your emotion and your thoughts, as an outer experience. But remember that your presence, the degree of presence you can have with it, is going to dictate how you utilize that situation and what future you bring about. Does that make sense? So, I guess instead of being a mirror for your outer experience, become a watcher of it. Because if you can't create a positive belief about a situation, like I can't see how this can be positive in any way, then just don't create any belief about the situation except for I'm just watching this experience. It's happening. I'm not going to argue with it. It is what it is, and move on. You're uncreating turmoil in your life by allowing situations that are out of your control to be as they are. So you are fully in control of the amount of limitation you experience, but you pretend to yourself that you're not, and you blame the outer as something that's being thrust upon you when you're actually thrusting yourself into it. You getting tired?
Yeah, I've been tired.
Do you want to continue, or would you like to stop? Because I think we're probably past 6. What time is it?
6:12.
6:12. I was gonna say I have one more topic if you want me to.
Yeah, that's be fun.
So consciousness and relationships. Relationships. I'm not talking about. I'm not just talking about love relationships or relationships with people like a partner. I'm just talking about relationships in general.
Okay.
So, on the intro to consciousness, when I started to understand this, is that as consciousness, which is anything I say isn't going to actually describe it because it's beyond concept, it's beyond words. Consciousness, when it goes into form, it manifests itself through different forms simultaneously. So every human being, every tree, everything is a manifestation of that one non-physical consciousness. So you are that one consciousness acting as one form. Does that make sense? And in the experience of being form, the only time you would interact with another form is because there is a mutual agreement to reflect something to each other that the other is wanting to learn on a soul level. So the purpose of everybody in your life is to teach you something about yourself. There's the one purpose that this whole experience brings about is that if you have a relationship with somebody, it is reflecting something to you specifically. Otherwise, the relationship couldn't even happen. There would be no leeway. You would walk by the person, never talk to them. There would be no connectivity. Like for example, if two people are harboring, let's say somebody's harboring energy of feeling like a victim, and they walk through a crowd, they may create the energy that makes that other person, a random person, feel like being a victimizer and attacking them or whatever it may be. But those two people had a mutual interest on a soul level. So this person needed an outer reflection of their inner beliefs, and this person, which obviously is a perpetrator, needed an outer reflection of how much of a perpetrator they are. So then they interact. Does that make sense? So all relationships are designed to be reflections, and it could be a reflection of what you don't prefer, which is still valid. So if one person you notice that is constantly lying or cheating or whatever it is that they're doing, they could be a reflection of what you don't prefer, or they could be an invitation to go back to old thinking and negativity or feeling like a victim, and the universe is asking you, what do you want to choose? So I guess the main point of the teaching would be use everything. You know what I mean?
Use everything?
Use everything in your experience
Yeah.
as a reflection, as a tool to ultimately learn how you're navigating your experience.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And maybe just a little bit of love.
A little bit of love.
Love everything. No. So yeah, if something is something you don't prefer, like something I've tried practicing is when I notice something's like about to make me like angry or upset, I get like really excited as like this is an opportunity that I can add non-angry energy to a situation that's bothering me, because I know that in that moment that I'm actually helping shift the trajectory of my life, because everything's an opportunity to expand your consciousness. And then when you're trying to do that, you'll notice that sometimes you go unconscious and you become very negative and very unhappy, and you whatever it may be, you could see more clearly the mechanisms of the fake self, of the conceptual self, of the limited self. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, I think that's it. All right, Nobodis Tribe, video 2. As always, safe travels in the now.